Episode 526. Beware the Cold-Blooded Johann. At the same time, in a corner of Evanston, a man wearing a golden mask sitting on the left side of a hall suddenly stood up and looked down at a text message. Light flashed in his dark eyes. Although he was still in a meeting, he immediately walked out of the hall.
"Where are you going? Mr. Schuler is still waiting for us."
A middle-aged man couldn't help but stand up and say. The man was extremely cold, and his voice was commanding. Even his most loyal confidant was afraid of him. In an icy tone with no emotion, he replied,
"I'm busy."
The meeting had not ended. Everyone else stared at his back and no one dared to say anything. The atmosphere was very solemn. After he left, someone finally spoke.
"Now that Johann has left, what should we do? Mr. Schuler is still... He's gone. What can we do?"
After Johann left, the middle-aged man finally sighed.
"If Mr. Schuler reported the truth and Johann wants to leave, who can stop him? Even the chief can't do anything about Johann. He's a cold-blooded animal, and we don't know if he can kill us in anger. It's better if we don't go against him."
If the chief can't do anything, no one in the entire alliance can control him. The subordinates couldn't help but feel worried. The chief rarely appeared in the alliance. Johann took care of most things. He only heard about the internal affairs today.
"I don't know. Anyway, the chief trusts him very much. However, I might know someone who can persuade him."
The middle-aged man paused in his sentence.
"Who?"
Many newcomers had joined the Underground Alliance in the past 2 years, and many of them looked at the middle-aged man curiously.
"I can't mention it."
The middle-aged man thought of something and hurriedly stopped talking. He looked at the people around him sternly.
"Especially in front of the chief, Johann, and the top 4 assassins. No one is allowed to mention it, otherwise I can't protect you."
The others were already fearful of Johann. Once the middle-aged man said that, they quickly gave up their curiosity. "Don't pretend." She sent this message. After that, Bessy calmly closed the windows. She glanced at the time on her phone before turning on her computer and staring at a video call. A face quickly appeared on the computer screen. It was still daytime for the other party. He was still on the streets, wearing a black shirt. The camera was turned and soon, a clear face was seen. He held his phone close and his long eyelashes could be seen. There was a familiar smile on his face.
"You're not asleep yet?"
It was Michael. "I just came back from the Research Institute. Are you okay?" Bessy drank her milk. As she left it in the open for too long, it was a little cold.
"I'm fine. Wait a moment."
Michael bent over, held the phone in his left hand, and then pushed someone to look at the camera.
"Brother, say hello to your sister."
Tucker's face suddenly appeared on the screen. His eyes were dark, and from his expression, he was obviously impatient. When he saw Bessy, the impatience on his face disappeared. His expression appeared excited as he said,
"Sister."
There was a little indignance in his voice. Before he could say something, Michael immediately interrupted him and made a serious complaint.
"Your brother bullied me. I initially wanted to call you, but my phone wasn't turned on for an hour just now."
Bessy put the empty cup on the table and glanced at Tucker.
"It's fine. He's like my younger brother anyway."
Michael patted Tucker's head and glanced at her seriously.
"You have to be very careful. Things have been complicated in the country recently, and there's an emergency situation to discuss with Christopher. You need to get some sleep. It's almost 2 a.m. there."
Michael frowned and urged her to hang up. "Okay." Bessy looked at him. She was just about to click on the red button to hang up. She supported her chin with the other hand and asked, "When are you coming back?" Hearing this, Michael paused. and then sighed softly.
When I'm done settling the matter here, it's either tomorrow or the day after. I'll try my best to get back quickly. Be good, and wait for me to come back.
Good night. In Japan, Michael hung up the phone and stared at it for a moment. He then sighed softly again. Bessy went to Chicago for a while, but he remained in the capital. When she returned to the capital, he went to Japan. Fortunately, nothing happened to Tucker.
Your performance wasn't bad. Your sister didn't suspect a thing.
Michael smiled. Beside him, Tucker lowered his head for a moment before faintly saying,
Thank you. Who are you thanking?
Michael put his phone back into his pocket and looked at him with a smile.
Thank you.
Tucker was expressionless. Michael smiled lazily.
Brother, who am I?
Tucker closed his mouth and didn't respond.
Boss, there's news from Christopher.
Terry hurriedly walked over with a file. Michael's expression became serious after he teased Tucker. At this time, he ordered someone.
Ask someone to send Tucker to where Brandon is staying. I will decide on the rest later.
After speaking, he lowered his head to look at Tucker.
Go to your great-uncle's place.
Tucker didn't respond. Terry told 2 people to take Tucker away. Tucker left with the 2 subordinates. After he took 2 steps, he ran back again. He hung his head low.
Thank you.
Michael was talking to Terry and didn't notice that Tucker was back again. After hearing his voice, he turned around and casually asked,
What did you say?
Tucker lifted his head.
Thank you, brother-in-law.
After that, his face turned red and he sprinted away. Beside him, Michael was startled for a moment before shaking his head with a smile.
That boy.
Terry also looked in Tucker's direction in shock and smiled before looking at him seriously.
The people from the Underground Alliance appeared in the capital. Jonas has also found Giant Crocodile. I have a conflict with Giant Crocodile, so if he liaises with Jonas, we will have some problems. Boss, should we look for Miss Miller?
Terry knew that Giant Crocodile and Bessy were close. Michael shook his head. He took a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and said,
Don't make things difficult for her.
Then Terry sighed.
The capital is too messy. You can find someone else.
Michael dusted away the soot. Terry was surprised.
Who else is there?
Michael turned around and glanced at him.
Lone Wolf.
Episode 527. The boss wants to work with you.
Lone Wolf is a senior member and important figure of 129. If he makes an appearance, it will be easy to deal with Giant Crocodile.
Terry nodded helplessly.
But that person is not even accepting jobs now.
Looking for him? It was almost impossible. Christopher and Terry expected that Jonas would look for Giant Crocodile and 129. After all, Sherry's chess piece had been in the capital for many years, and it would definitely come in handy. This wouldn't be meaningful in other times, but right now, the Underground Alliance was casting covetous eyes at it. Terry had to be cautious. The Underground Alliance was different from the other forces. It was the top 3 force in Austria, and Japan was an equal match to them, so they couldn't make a mistake.
Negotiate with 129 first.
Michael bit his cigarette and said lightly,
Okay.
Terry nodded and proceeded with this matter. 2 days later, Bessy and Pete went to the hospital to visit Pete's father. Luke is back today. He's at the coffee shop near Northwestern University. Bessy put her hands in her pockets as she spoke to Pete. They were going to see Luke later. As soon as she finished speaking, the phone in her pocket rang. Bessy took it out and looked at the caller ID. It was Noah.
Great Arranger.
The person on the other end of the phone had stayed up for 2 days. He walked out of his room with a tired face and red eyes.
I just heard about what happened to the World Poker Tour. Are you okay?
I'm great. Bessy was about to contact him, and he called her just in time. How are things going for you? In recent years, Bessy helped Noah a lot when she was in the World Poker Tour. It was more important to please the influential and wealthy in the entertainment circle than in the capital. Bessy was a little worried that Noah would be affected.
I'm glad that you're doing okay.
Noah ignored his manager's expression and said solemnly,
Great arranger, if you need any help, just tell me.
It's okay. Bessy couldn't help but smile. I haven't reached that point yet. She originally wanted to talk to him about the contract. However, Noah didn't bring it up, so she didn't mention it and decided to look for him tomorrow. They hung up. Bessy got into the car, looked at her phone, and called Zeke.
Are you talking about Noah?
Zeke had just returned to the capital. He passed a box to his manager. Hearing her, he paused and said,
There are still a few years left on his contract. Should I sign him to my company?
He was deceived into signing a 10-year contract, and there are still 5 years left. Bessy said. She knew that she was already late.
5 years?
Zeke did some calculations.
His company probably won't let him go because of the sky-high contract termination fees.
There was indeed an astronomical termination fee to end a 5-year contract. Regarding the cancellation of the contract, Bessy leaned back. Leave it to me.
It'll be good if you can solve it.
Zeke smiled. He stopped beside a car and sighed.
If my brother didn't tell Jack, I wouldn't have known about the matter involving the World Poker Tour.
She must be crazy. He wasn't in the circle, but he was rather close to Jack and knew about Poppy's influence.
Mr. Cheatham said that he wants to disclose the news to the public to increase the Miller Corporation's cohesion.
Zeke remembered another issue. Listen to his nonsense. Bessy sneered. Slave her openly. Zeke couldn't comment much on Emmanuel and Bessy's relationship. He only smiled.
But once it goes public...
He was afraid that a whirlwind would hit the IT world this year. On the other hand, Simon looked at Noah solemnly.
Why didn't you talk about your current problems? What problems do I have now?
There wasn't any anxiety written on Noah's face. He calmly kept the documents in his hands.
It'll be fine as long as there's nothing wrong on the boss's side. Your dad has withdrawn all his investment into your next concert,
Simon said directly.
Oh.
Noah nodded indifferently.
It doesn't matter as long as I can continue to write songs.
Simon looked at him in disbelief with his mouth agape. In the past few years, things were smooth, and he pursued his music career with peace of mind. With the World Poker Tour and Nico behind him, he didn't accept any commercial, TV, or show appearances. The only variety show appearance he made was because of Bessy. His singles made a lot
she thought.
This is Caleb, my personal guard, and
of money, and 70% belonged to the company. However, there was a problem in the World Poker Tour now. The company used to go with the flow, but it would definitely not let go of a big cash cow like him so easily. When the time came, they would make Noah accept more advertising jobs and variety shows. Simon thought about it deeply.
Are you sure there's nothing wrong with the boss?
Simon knew that it wouldn't make a difference even if he asked about it and changed the topic.
World Poker Tour has caused things to escalate, so what exactly are they trying to do?
Noah scratched his messy hair and didn't want to think about this any longer.
I'm going to take a shower. Go ahead. You have to go to the office tomorrow,
Simon said sternly. Office commitments were to be taken seriously. Bessy waited for Luke at the restaurant with Pete. She sat inside and played a game on her phone as usual. In the middle of her game, a message popped up at the top of the screen. Bessy glanced at it casually. It was from Jared.
The boss of Japan wants to work with you.
Episode 528. Nameless Black Card. Bessy casually swiped the notification away. After she finished playing her game, she slowly clicked on Jared's icon and replied, "I'm on vacation. Don't disturb me." Jared replied,
On vacation?
Hearing the crisp sound of the wind chime at the door, Bessy looked up and saw Luke dressed in plain clothes and walking in unhurriedly with a book. Bessy did not immediately reply to him. She placed her phone aside and said, "Luke." Beside her, Pete also stood up in excitement.
Luke! Please sit.
Luke sat across from Bessy and put his physics research materials on the table.
I see that you've become a famous translator on the website. Have you thought about simultaneous translation?
Luke was the one who had introduced Pete to translation. In his free time, Luke would also take notice of his work. Luke was always a little worried about Bessy, Scarlett, Brian, and Pete.
If you make the champion of the national physics competition, who was admitted into Northwestern University in advance, pursue simultaneous translation. Dean Soup won't let you off.
Bessy glanced at him. Speaking of Dean Soup, the atmosphere instantly became more relaxed.
Dean Soup is really fast.
Luke shook his head. After the three of them chatted for a while, he looked at Bessy calmly.
I've heard about the situation from people in the laboratory, and I just went to pay my respects to Mr. White.
When Principal White was mentioned, Bessy lowered her gaze and changed the subject. Is your teacher back?
We came back together. Director Fielder is looking for him.
Luke replied. Then he asked Pete.
Is your father still in the same state?
Yes. Pete held his coffee cup and said,
It's neither good nor bad.
Luke nodded, finished his coffee and said lightly,
How is the White family's business with Austria?
Bessy leaned back. The delivery will be made in 2 days.
Is someone surveilling the situation?
Luke glanced at her and frowned slightly. Yes, Bessy smiled. She would monitor it personally. Luke's phone suddenly rang. He lowered his head and didn't answer it immediately. Finally, he looked at Bessy.
It's the laboratory.
Luke, focus on your research, Bessy said seriously. After what happened to Principal White, she didn't want to involve anyone else important to her. Luke glanced at her, strummed his fingers on the table, and didn't respond. Bessy waited for Luke to leave for the Research Institute before asking Marvin to send her to the White family. Just as Marvin's car started, she received another message on her phone.
Noah went to Star Entertainment.
Star Entertainment was the company Noah was currently contracted to. After Mr. White passed away, Bessy arranged for several people to follow him and Scarlett. After receiving the news, Bessy looked up and said, Marvin, let's go to Star Entertainment.
Star Entertainment?
Marvin was unfamiliar with the entertainment industry, so he turned on the GPS. He looked in the rearview mirror. Bessy was leaning against the window as usual and playing with a black card in her hand. Marvin recognized it. Patrick also had such a card. There was no name on it. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Star Entertainment.
I'm sorry, this elevator is for authorized use only. Do you have an appointment, miss?
A security officer outside the lift of Star Entertainment stopped Bessy. Marvin stood behind her and said in a low voice,
Miss Miller, I will throw them aside.
Bessy was playing with her phone, and it seemed like she skipped a few lines of numbers. No need, she said casually. At the same time, verification success. Nowadays, due to the World Poker Tour's popularity, most elevators used fingerprints or pupil scans for authentication. Seeing the elevator door open, the two security guards quickly stepped aside.
Miss, please enter.
Bessy calmly walked into the elevator. Marvin originally wanted to tackle the bodyguards. But when he saw the elevator door open, he straightened his chest and followed Bessy in, very seriously. The elevator doors slowly closed. Outside his office in Star Entertainment, Simon stared sternly at Noah.
Noah, you will remember later that we're no better than before. The president will talk about variety shows and advertisements. Don't say anything. I will help you deal with it. Don't cause any trouble for the boss.
Noah was popular in the industry for only wanting to focus on music and was uninterested in filming or other promotional activities. At the start, Simon didn't understand his ways, but he was moved by his passion for music and didn't question him. However, now, the World Poker Tour's backing was gone. Noah could no longer do as he pleased.
Okay,
the masked Noah replied. When the two of them walked in, the president of Star Entertainment was currently talking to someone with a smile.
Don't worry, there definitely won't be any problems on my side.
When he saw Noah, the president of Star Entertainment paused.
Look, Noah is here. Noah, this is Director Simpson, the most famous director of Entertainment Channel. Last year's popular show Escape from the Haunted House? I've signed you up for it. You should sign the agreement and pack up in the next 2 days.
Noah lowered his head and didn't say anything. Simon laughed and played along. The president wasn't outrageously demanding and did not overlook Noah's popularity. It'd be settled if the contract was signed. Simon motioned for Noah to sign it. Noah picked up a pen and signed his name. Seeing them like that, the president was satisfied. He looked at the documents that Noah signed, remembered something, and then said to his secretary,
"Ask Melody to come in."
Soon, a tall girl walked in. The president leaned back into his chair.
Noah, this is our company's trainee who debuted with the highest score. Ask Nico to write a song for her.
Episode 529. Unfair Contract Terms. The god-level composer Nico was well known in the industry. When Noah was at the peak of his fame, Nico. How could the president of Star Entertainment not be greedy? Unfortunately, things were different in the Star Entertainment internal management team, and even the president didn't dare to provoke Noah, let alone try to contact the figurehead behind him. But things were different now. Bessy and Nico's identities were well known. When the World Poker Tour publicly dissed Bessy, the news spread like wildfire on the internet, and public opinion was controlled by the World Poker Tour. Twitter was filled with posts dragging Bessy down. Hundreds of millions of anti-fans were very frightening. In Evanston, even the 4 main families couldn't compare to the World Poker Tour. This was how it operated. It was fickle and catered to those in power. Noah had already signed the show contract. His IQ wasn't high, but he knew that Simon was right this time. He didn't want to trouble Simon and Bessy further, so he just decided to sign the contract. However, when the president of Star Entertainment mentioned Bessy, his grip tightened around the pen, and he raised his head. As he didn't sleep for several days, he wasn't in a good mood.
It's impossible. This isn't something you can refuse. Don't forget how you became popular here in the first place. If it weren't for the talent show held by the company, do you think you'd be here today? We're just asking for Nico to compose 1 song for her. How dare you show me such an attitude?
The president of Star Entertainment slammed the table.
Mr. President, don't be angry. I'll talk to Nico about it.
Simon smiled and tried to calm the president down before pulling Noah aside. He succinctly told him 2 sentences. In the office, the secretary looked at the president of Star Entertainment. "Mr. President, is it okay to be so insistent? Although the World Poker Tour has nothing to do with Nico anymore, the White family still has Northwestern University." His secretary was a little worried.
What problem can there be? If she's so powerful, then why is everyone on the internet dissing her? The entire American IT market is in the hands of the World Poker Tour. You'll know if you see the latest online public opinion. Let's see if Noah dares to refuse. If he does, he will breach a contract that requires him more than 10 lifetimes to pay back.
The president of Star Entertainment lit a cigarette and said mysteriously,
"A World Poker Tour's insider has given me this news. That Bessy is really done for."
He then looked at Melody.
"Baby, don't worry. I will definitely get Nico to make you as popular as Noah."
The two talked. After some time, Simon and Noah walked in after a discussion.
"Have you decided?"
The president smiled and looked at Noah.
"Yes,"
Simon said. Noah stood behind Simon and didn't make a sound.
"President, you should know that the God Arranger Nico and Noah don't have a contract. We can't force the Great Arranger if she doesn't want to participate."
Simon continued to smile.
"I know you want to promote Melody. I have discussed this with Noah, and we think that the songs don't have to be composed by the God Arranger herself. Noah can also help Melody by being her mentor, and she can debut as his protege. They can be seen together and gain popularity together. You should know that Noah is the king of engagement in the entertainment industry, second only to Film God. With him, there's no need to worry about Melody. Of course, if you aren't satisfied, Noah can participate in 2 more shows."
When Simon heard this, his heart bled. Noah was indeed a rare singer in the entertainment circle. He always had a clean reputation. If he had an unclear relationship with female artists, not only would his popularity suddenly drop, but he would also gain many haters. However, Simon had no choice. Look for Bessy? Ask Bessy to compose a song for Melody? Melody was musically illiterate and talentless. She wasn't worthy. Furthermore, Bessy initially composed for Noah for free. If Bessy and Noah both gave in and agreed, who knew whether the president of Star Entertainment would demand more and ask them to compose songs for his lousy girlfriend? Melody's remarks completely addressed the president's true intentions. No one in the entertainment industry was stupid. Since Noah was willing to actively cooperate, it was definitely better than forcing him. It was very familiar. The president of Star Entertainment turned around and smiled at Noah.
"Please wait for a moment. I will ask my secretary to reissue a confidential contract. Simon, you really understand me."
Simon also had a relaxed smile on his face. However, he was clenching his fists tightly on both sides. There were templates for such agreements, and it took less than 2 minutes to print a copy. After a few minutes, the secretary came in with a new contract. Simon glanced at it. There were many terms on it, including how Noah had to maintain the relationship with Melody for 2 years and had to help Melody compose songs. The terms were just unfair. Simon almost wanted to lash out in anger. However, Noah read it calmly. After that, he picked up a pen and was about to sign it. Compared to his anger when he heard about Bessy, he was extremely calm now. Just when he was about to finish signing, a voice came from outside. "I'm sorry, miss, you can't go in." In the midst of pushing and shouting, the office door was opened. Noah and Simon glanced at the office door. Bessy took off her baseball cap and walked into the office coldly and confidently. Noah was taken aback.
"Great Arranger, why are you here?"
Bessy didn't respond. She only walked to Noah's side and snatched the document that he was holding. "What are you signing?" Episode 530. Bessy becomes a hot topic. The contract consisted of 3 sheets of paper. Bessy had always read these things quickly. After quickly finishing to read the first page of the contract, she didn't even bother to read the remaining 2 pages. She only tilted her head and pouted her lips as she looked at Noah. She smiled softly and said expressionlessly, "1 scandal a week. The woman won't comment, but you will respond. Are you willing to do something so stupid?" Noah moved the corners of his mouth. He then lowered his head and said weakly, "I like it." Bessy understood Noah's temperament. He definitely had some repressed feelings. She nodded and didn't ask any more questions. After that, she crushed the contract into a ball and threw it behind her. The crushed paper fell into a trash bin not far away.
Great arranger, calm.
Before Simon could finish, he swallowed his words and watched as the contract was thrown into the bin. Although it was not appropriate, he was very relieved. The president of Star Entertainment was enraged. He stood up and threw the cup in his hand on the ground.
What are you trying to do? Screw with me?
Simon's expression changed and he smiled.
President, we should discuss things calmly.
Bessy also found a stool and sat down. She looked at the president of Star Entertainment, raised her eyebrows, and didn't say anything. Seeing Simon's reaction, the president of Star Entertainment felt that he was in control. He paused and finally said,
Print another copy of the contract. Furthermore, Nico has to compose 2 songs for Melody every year. Since you've agreed to let Noah participate in the scandal, I don't think you need the great arranger to compose songs.
Simon frowned and was unable to suppress his anger. Once he spoke, Bessy finally understood what sort of contract Noah was being made to sign. You want me to compose? Bessy tilted her head and looked at the president with a smile.
Miss Miller, you're right.
The president of Star Entertainment smiled suspiciously at her. Bessy raised her lip. She supported her chin with her hand and slowly spat out 2 words. Dream on.
Okay, very good. You have guts. I want to see how you will cancel the contract then.
The president of Star Entertainment sneered.
No, President, we don't have this idea at all.
Simon hurriedly tried to save the situation and whispered to Bessy.
Great arranger, please don't irritate the president. Noah has had a smooth career for years. A scandal is nothing much to him. We really can't terminate the contract because of the fee. You don't have to worry about him. I'm aware of your current situation. It'll be better after some time.
After he spoke, Simon finally looked at the president. Bessy looked at Simon for a long while before she nodded and didn't say anything more. Seeing that Bessy was persuaded, Simon breathed a sigh of relief and continued to negotiate with the president of Star Entertainment.
It's fine as long as you have come to a decision. It's also okay if Nico is unwilling to compose. Noah will just have to participate in more shows. I will also accept more movie and TV roles for him.
The president of Star Entertainment continued slowly. Beside him, his secretary was preparing the contract again. There were no other noises in the office. After a long while, the secretary wrote out a new contract and handed it to Simon. It was snatched away by Bessy. When she looked at it, it was still filled with unfair terms. Noah walked over.
Great arranger, I will sign it.
Who asked you to sign it? Bessy glanced at him.
Bessy.
The president of Star Entertainment saw her looking at the contract.
Very good. I see that you really think you're something big. Cancel the contract.
At the same time, Bessy's phone rang. She lowered her head to look at it. It was a number from Evanston. Are you here? A man's voice responded.
Yes, the reception desk says I don't have an appointment.
You do. Bessy smiled.
I don't.
The man paused, thought about it, and said,
Appointment. Great, I will get in the elevator now.
After the phone call, Bessy placed her hands on the table, stood up, and said to the president without hesitation, I'm very happy to cancel the contract.
Great Arranger, we can't do that because we can't afford the termination fee. It's fine just to scare him.
Simon pulled Bessy's sleeve and wanted to say something more. Bessy only looked at the doorway.
Mr. Barnes, come this way.
Outside the door, a door guard came in with a tall man.
Miss Miller, I'm not late, right?
The person said calmly while looking at the people in the office. Mr. Barnes. Bessy nodded and greeted him politely. Sorry to trouble you.
It's nothing.
Mr. Barnes waved his hand. Bessy handed him the black card and then looked at Noah and Simon. Let's go. The two of them looked at each other before following her.
That is...
Simon recognized people easily.
I think I saw him on the news before. Isn't he Freddie Barnes, the well-known lawyer in Evanston?
Bessy nodded casually. Simon stopped asking about Mr. Barnes and was worried about the termination of the contract. He smiled bitterly.
Great Arranger, you were too impulsive. Do you know how much the termination fee is?
It was at least $200,000. He couldn't pay it back even in 10 years. However, Bessy smiled at him. Do you really think I'm defeated? Simon was shocked.
But the internet.
Bessy patted his shoulder and placed the baseball cap on her head again. She looked at the time on her phone. It was almost time. Well, check out the Miller Corporation's official website. Inside the office, when Bessy and the rest left, the president of Star Entertainment's heart sank. Even if Noah didn't participate in shows, he was still the company's cash cow and the face of the company. He only used the termination fee to threaten Noah because the fee was enormous. Noah's current net worth was insufficient. However, Bessy was really going to make Noah cancel the contract. His company would be done for then, as its stock price would definitely plummet, especially since he also had to face Mr. Barnes. The president of Star Entertainment regretted being too greedy. Before he discussed the termination fee with Mr. Barnes, his secretary received a call and quickly turned on his phone to look at Twitter. He opened a notification and said with a dazed expression,
President, something happened. What?
The president looked up. The secretary showed him the hot topics on Twitter. Poppy, Bessy, World Poker Tour's Poppy, Miller Corporation's Bessy. After 6 months, Bessy became a hot search topic again. Episode 531. Contract terminated. The news struck like a tornado. Public opinion on the internet was instantly reversed. The president of Star Entertainment didn't even think of it himself. He only wanted the king of engagement to make a fortune for his company and use him to promote someone. He didn't expect that Noah would cancel the contract and Bessy would be able to cause an uproar. Every industry had its own rules. In literature, science, IT, and electronics. Every industry was dominated by a family. For example, in the Evanston entertainment circle, the Soup family was a giant that could not be shaken. The president of Star Entertainment had never heard of Poppy, but nowadays, the security system in almost every computer in America was developed by Poppy. If she charged a fee, her personal wealth was unimaginable. There was an understanding in the IT world that you could criticize almost anyone, but if you tried to criticize Poppy and Emmanuel, who always selflessly shared core technologies, you would become public enemy of the entire IT industry. This was the reason why the giant World Poker Tour couldn't control the generals of the 28th floor. The president of Star Entertainment sat blankly on his chair. Without Noah, how could his company use its past reputation to attract newcomers and investors? By relying on Melody? The president really regretted his decision. He shouldn't have been greedy and just believed any news about the World Poker Tour. He only looked at Mr. Barnes, smiling like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Even Mr. Barnes had moved out, and Bessy definitely didn't discuss anything with him. In the car, Simon sat in the passenger's seat and concentrated on scrolling through Twitter. He glanced at Bessy from time to time. "Where do you live now?" Bessy asked him.
"A place allocated by Star Entertainment."
Noah withdrew his gaze. As Noah was a public figure, an ordinary community naturally couldn't protect him from the paparazzi, so he always lived in a secretive community. He could also be found working in his studio. In the past, when he had the World Poker Tour behind him, Star Entertainment took extreme care of him. The environment was good, so Noah didn't move out. Now that he had terminated his contract with Star Entertainment, he couldn't live there anymore. "I will ask my uncle to arrange new accommodation for you." Bessy took off her baseball cap, coughed twice, and then continued. "I'm sure you know my uncle. Do you want to use his studio too? Otherwise, you can also open your own studio."
"I will sign a contract with Uncle Jack then,"
Noah said seriously.
"I can participate in a few shows."
This time, he really couldn't afford the Star Entertainment contract termination fee. Noah was also self-aware and could only help Uncle Jack by participating in a few shows. Compared to Star Entertainment, Noah was very happy to sign up for shows while working for Film God. He thought about it and decided that he'd suggest a few shows for him to appear in when he signed the contract with Film God. Marvin drove the car directly to the Miller family's house. At this time, Film God had just arrived home.
"You've lost weight."
When he heard a servant say that Bessy had arrived, Film God walked out without finishing his glass of water. Bessy got out of the car. The weather signified that it was almost April. She was wearing a black fleece sweater with a white shirt underneath. Her sleeves weren't long enough, and he could tell from her expression that she was a little cold. However, she was still in high spirits. Zeke tried to speed things up, and thankfully, he was able to finish filming his scene ahead of schedule and return because his director was accommodating. He didn't accept any jobs recently. Now, the Miller family, Bessy and Michael, weren't in a stable position, and even James had stepped forward.
"Noah, let's go in and talk."
Zeke stretched out his hand to pat Bessy's head before looking at Noah. Bessy looked at him and her fingers tightened. After she found out about the patriarch of the Miller family's affairs, she was a little afraid to face the members of the Miller family. "You can talk about the contract. I'll visit the White family for a while," Bessy said. She coughed in a low voice and stopped at the entrance. The White family's research institute wasn't stable, and recently it had placed its focus on Austria again. This transaction was very important. Bessy wanted to personally witness it.
"Are you sick?"
Zeke glanced at her. Bessy shook her head casually. "Maybe I have a cold." Zeke couldn't control her. He frowned before slowly saying,
"Go, but don't tire yourself too much. If it really can't work out, just come back to the Miller family. You must be careful."
In the White family house, Norman and Kenneth were busy handling the situation. When Bessy arrived, they were still in an internal meeting.
"Miss Miller."
When he saw Bessy, Norman quickly stood up and gave up his seat for her. "No need." Bessy dragged a chair over from a corner and said to him, "You can all continue the discussion. I will just listen." At the conference table, Kenneth's uncle glanced at her and then lowered his head.
"Tomorrow, we will leave from the north of the city."
Kenneth put down the documents in his hand and looked at her. He said in a clear and serious voice,
"We still have a group of people in Austria. This time, we need to be very careful.
If someone were to make trouble, it would definitely be a blow to the White family." Bessy slightly relaxed her legs, and her face looked a little pale. Hearing that, she nodded slightly. "I've got it. I will join you tomorrow."
"You?"
Kenneth looked at her and frowned slightly.
"Are you sick?"
Episode 532. Many people are looking for you. I'm fine. I just caught a little cold. The 2 leaders of the Research Institute are already standing by me, so it's not a big problem. I will go with you as insurance, Bessy said lightly with her arms around her chest. Kenneth shook his head and retracted his gaze.
Since you are sick, you should stay in the capital. I will lead the team. With Harvey, no accidents will occur.
Bessy ignored him and only instructed Norman. I will go with you tomorrow night. You should make the preparations.
Miss Miller, regarding Mr. O'Malley, do you have any conflicts?
Norman added. She shook her head. No. Since she answered like this, the others didn't dare to ask much. Lynn had already left the White family. The White family didn't ask much about where he had gone. Once Lynn was gone, a large percentage of the people were relieved, especially Kenneth's uncle. Since they trusted Bessy again, Lynn was no longer a part of the White family. After Bessy was done giving instructions, she checked the time on her phone and realized that Michael was almost in the capital now. She got up and said, "Let's proceed this way. I need to go." After she left, Kenneth looked at Norman and raised his eyebrow.
She's sick. Are you really letting her go?
Kenneth's uncle lowered his head. His eyes flashed, but he didn't say anything. The other people didn't speak. Everyone was aware of Bessy's strength. With her there, they would definitely be safer. At the airport, Michael got off the plane with Terry. Japan wasn't very cold, and Michael was wearing a thin shirt. He calmly left via the exit. Bessy leaned on the railing nearby. She had a light expression, delicate eyebrows, and a willfulness that couldn't be hidden. Even though she was wearing a baseball cap, she still stood out. She was very conspicuous in the crowd. Michael saw her as soon as he came out. He didn't pause and walked over.
Bessy, I think you're very awesome.
When he reached the edge of the railing, his smile faded a little, and he said nonchalantly. Bessy was still thinking about the World Poker Tour and Jonas. When she heard Michael, she was caught off guard and looked up. After that, she pursed her lips.
Just do it as I said.
Michael didn't have a jacket. He only turned to Terry and asked him to get a jacket from his luggage. He then gently put it on Bessy. Bessy's throat was a little uncomfortable, and she wanted to cough again. However, hearing Michael's voice, she forced herself to hold it back. She only slowly held the jacket closer to her. Marvin followed behind the 2 of them and stared at Michael. He couldn't help but murmur that perhaps only Michael could manage Bessy. Even Zeke couldn't control her. The group went back to the villa. Christopher and the others were already sitting in the living room downstairs. Michael glanced around, paused, and then asked,
"Where is Bessy's aunt?" "She went to see the house with Pete,"
Christopher replied. Michael had already arranged a house for them, but after considering Pete's character, he probably wouldn't stay there. He didn't ask more questions and looked at Bessy.
"After 2 days, when things are settled, let's invite your aunt for a meal."
"Okay." Bessy coughed lightly.
129 is difficult to deal with. I truly admire Sherry a little.
Christopher pressed his temple. It was impenetrable. Christopher seemed to be unable to find any breakthroughs. He originally wanted to ask Michael about Giant Crocodile, but after seeing Bessy, he decided otherwise. Michael said that this incident with Giant Crocodile shouldn't involve Bessy, and everyone took it to heart. At this time, Bessy was currently holding a hot cup of tea and was slowly drinking it. When she heard Christopher's words, she couldn't help but glance at him. "Are you looking for 129 for a job?"
"Something like that."
Michael sat beside her and asked Marvin to bring over a medicine box. He opened it and looked for some medicine.
"We're looking for Lone Wolf."
Bessy paused and then looked up.
"Take your medicine first."
Michael frowned. He then placed his hand on her forehead.
You don't have a fever, and it doesn't seem to be a viral cold. Do you have other symptoms?
He also couldn't tell. He wanted to take Bessy to Daniel for a checkup. You're making a fuss. Bessy shook her head and didn't seem to care. She changed the subject. Why are you looking for Lone Wolf?
Take your medicine first.
Michael glanced at her and only responded after she was done.
We want to make a deal with him.
Michael didn't say specifically what type of transaction it was. Bessy was deep in thought.
Go upstairs and rest,
Michael said again. Bessy wanted to say something, but didn't dare to. She looked at Michael a little convincingly. It will work, right? Can I go upstairs? She picked up her baseball cap from the table expressionlessly, put it on, and went upstairs. After he saw Bessy go upstairs, Christopher frowned. He looked at Marvin.
Has Miss Miller been unusual recently? Except for the lack of sleep you told me about? I think there isn't.
Marvin scratched his head. Michael nodded slightly and didn't say anything. He picked up his phone and sent a message to Daniel, before saying to Christopher and the others,
Let's go to the study and talk about it.
Upstairs, Bessy took a shower. As she crawled onto her bed, she gave Jared a video call. Jared.
Aren't you on vacation?
Jared looked at her expressionlessly. I'm temporarily not on vacation. Bessy leaned on the pillow and pulled the blanket up. Are there people looking for me recently?
Are you referring to Lone Wolf?
Jared asked. Recently, many people were looking for Lone Wolf of 129 and also Bessy. Jared didn't know that she was so in demand. Yes. Bessy suppressed a cough. Jared lit up a cigarette and didn't seem to mind it much.
Many people are looking for you. Who are you referring to? Matthew, Jonas, World Poker Tour, and that person from Japan.
Episode 533. A meeting between two important bosses. He listed about 8 different people to Bessy and casually said that all of them were bosses in their own aspects. So many people are looking for me? Bessy was shocked.
Lone Wolf, do you still not understand your weight in 129? It's rumored that you're the number 1 in 129. What do you think?
Jared had a headache.
Can you be more self-aware? You can't just randomly take vacations because you are a part of 129.
Bessy carried on listening, but she didn't hear Christopher's name. She couldn't help but lean back and raise her eyebrow slightly. Jonas is also looking for me?
Yes.
Jared leaned back and dusted off the soot from his fingers.
He's very ambitious and wants to use you to control the 4 major families in the capital. However, you asked me to investigate the Fairfield bombing. Jonas didn't do anything, but someone is using a scapegoat. This person is very shrewd, but is too conceited. Michael's conjectures about the White family's affairs are close to the truth. You should know who's the one scheming behind the scenes.
Bessy nodded. It was close to her suspicions. She didn't believe anything Sherry told her at the start. She leaned back, took out her computer, and tapped a few words on the keyboard. At the same time, Jonas's security was working on a document. Suddenly, rows of words appeared on the computer. The secretary was busy processing the files, so the dialog box popping up scared him. Once he came back to reality and read the content, his eyes widened. He hurriedly went to the office to look for Jonas. In Jonas's office, Jonas said,
My son is really something. Many powerful forces are still hiding in Japan. I really underestimated him.
He was smoking a cigarette. When he saw the man in black in front of him, he lowered his eyes.
Is there any news from Sherry? It was just sent to me, so it must be right.
The man in black bowed. Jonas bit his cigarette. The signs of aging on his face weren't very obvious.
Is the Schuler family about to take action? Several forces appeared in the capital recently.
The man in black frowned.
Will the Schuler family? If we can get 129's help, we won't fall into a passive position. Look for Sherry tomorrow and verify the situation regarding 129 with her.
Jonas squinted slightly. Just as the two of them were conversing, the secretary knocked on the door and then entered with his phone.
What's the matter?
Jonas glanced at him. Chairman. The secretary paused and finally said,
I just received some news. The other party wants to meet you. Who?
Jonas exhaled a smoke ring. The secretary thought about it and said,
That particular Miss Miller. Bessy?
Jonas remembered this name and instinctively frowned. Recently, Bessy was on his radar. He was aware of the series of defense measures she took to protect the White family and the Research Institute. If it weren't for Sherry, Jonas would also think of Bessy highly. Unfortunately, Jonas shook his head faintly and seemed to smile.
The White family doesn't have many days left. You can all leave.
The secretary waited for a long time, but didn't get an answer from Jonas. He went out with the man in black. After the door was closed, the secretary looked at the man in black.
What does the chairman mean? The president is going to the border to contact Miss Flake tomorrow. Do you understand now?
The man in black glanced at him lightly. The secretary finally understood.
I see. I will reply to Miss Miller now.
Without Sherry, Jonas might still meet Bessy. However, there was finally some news from Sherry. The situation in the capital was complicated, and 129 was very important as a neutral force. At this time, the man in black was very clear about whether Bessy was important. The secretary returned to his office. There was still a white dialogue box on the computer. The text was in the Times New Roman font. Jonas's security system was one of the best, but the other party managed to bypass it quietly. The secretary couldn't help but respectfully reply,
I'm sorry, Miss Miller. Our chairman doesn't have the time at the moment.
He didn't dare to say that he was going to see Sherry. At the other end, Bessy read the secretary's reply and couldn't help but scratch her head. She didn't pursue the matter and only tapped the keyboard with her fingers. After a long while, she finally leaned her head against the pillow. She thought of what Jared said just now. There were indeed many forces in the capital recently. Besides the Underground Alliance, there was Giant Crocodile. Bessy couldn't control these forces, and they wouldn't cause too much trouble. Except for one. She pursed her lips. Jared mentioned this boss from Japan before. Bessy knew this person. She even met him in Japan before, and fought with him. At that time, she was in a bad mood, and the other party didn't seem pleased as well. Besides, the situation was just bad. Later, she was rescued by Daniel. She didn't have the will to survive at that time, and dying at the hands of one of her competitors would also damage her reputation. However, Bessy supported her forehead with her hand. At that time, she was unclear about her will, but she could clearly understand Daniel's words. He kept asking her to seek revenge from the person who beat her. Although she didn't join the force because of that boss, Daniel's words really gave her the courage to get up again. In the years since, Bessy accepted many jobs, but had never taken any jobs from Japan. The other party had always been in Japan and never participated in other affairs. But this time, he suddenly came to the capital. The capital was already chaotic enough as many forces had already gathered in Austria. With him included, Bessy was unsure of whether these few families could remain intact. Bessy frowned. She tapped on her phone. After a long while, she finally sent a message to Jared. I've met the person you told me about before. Episode 534, Hidden Truth. Bessy's message came unexpectedly. She had always been someone who didn't like to worry too much. Most of her tasks were chosen by Jared, and he only contacted her if he felt that they were suitable for her. Jared had always been direct. He didn't reply to her and immediately called her instead.
Go ahead. Tell me why.
It's a headache. Bessy looked up and her tone was still quite calm. Well, you know that I'm not much of a good person. Half of the people I know are my enemies, and the other half are my friends. The person from Japan is one of them. Since Bessy called him an enemy, he was definitely not an ordinary person and was at least on par with Giant Crocodile. She had so many enemies.
But you were able to survive?
Jared fell silent. I died once. Bessy sighed before continuing. You probably know why. As for whether she was forced to a dead end or really wanted to die, Bessy didn't say specifically. Anyway, it was a freak combination of factors. Jared was speechless.
Fierce.
It seemed like a situation Bessy was directly involved in, and she was impatiently forced to confront it. Jared didn't say much and remembered that Bessy disappeared for a year.
The boss of Japan?
Bessy scratched her head. She was a little unwilling to admit it, but she still honestly said, I led some people to compete with him in business, and in the end, I even fought a battle to the death with him. At that time, he was injured, but even though I took advantage of it, I couldn't beat him.
Amazing. Lone Wolf, you're really amazing. Now even the mafia in Japan is unwilling to go against him.
Jared frowned. He was originally from Japan and couldn't help but feel a headache coming after he heard Bessy's words.
Has he found you? Is that why he wants to meet you?
I'm not sure, but I'm afraid that he will be involved in the affairs in the capital. Bessy frowned. When she entered Austria, she was originally disguised. Anyway, the internet was in her control, and anyone who tried to look for her using it would fail. After all, she had been in hiding for so many years. Just like her friends, her enemies were spread all over the world. After Scarlett's father's death, Bessy felt guilty and frightened. She feared that the enemies around her would be like the drug lord and hurt her relatives. She couldn't even protect Bertha. How could she protect other people?
It really isn't something that can be easily solved.
Jared didn't really know how to help her.
Does Michael know about it?
I initially didn't want anyone to know about this. Bessy looked out of the window. I have more than one enemy in Japan. The 7 continents have people who want to take my life. She originally thought that these things were over. As long as she didn't voluntarily show herself, no one would be able to guess who she was. She knew how powerful the Underground Alliance was. If she didn't stand up again, the families in the capital wouldn't be enough for them to play with. She had just confessed to Johan that some people from Japan snuck into the capital. Regardless of whether it was information leaked from the Underground Alliance, she didn't have to hide anymore. After hearing what Bessy said, Jared didn't dare to ask her how she managed to offend so many powerful people.
I finally know why you didn't want to show yourself.
After some time, he finally said,
I will help you contact people in Japan.
Jared paused before continuing.
Do you want me to accompany you?
I can solve it myself. I'm just giving you a heads up. Bessy looked up. At the other end of the phone, Jared thought about it, but didn't say anything more.
Sure, I will help you contact people.
At the same time, in the study, Alexander sat in front of the computer and typed out pages of codes. He propped his leg up and squinted at the kneeling man in black.
Are you sure that Giant Crocodile and Mr. Klein have joined forces?
If Jonas was here, he would definitely recognize this man in black as his confidant.
Yes, Giant Crocodile helped him find Miss Flake, and tomorrow he will be able to contact her," said the man in black. After all, America was Jonas's home ground. A foreigner could never know the place as well as the local. Giant Crocodile also participated in this. Most importantly, there was the Underground Alliance. Michael didn't dare to underestimate his opponent. He didn't want any accident to happen to any of the families in the capital. In this situation, he could only create an alliance. Jared's former forces had some entanglements with Michael. Thinking about it, only Lone Wolf could join Alexander and the rest. "I know that 129 is very powerful."
Marvin listened indifferently as 4 of his brothers spoke.
"But they're not just famous in Evanston. Is it because you don't know which famous force to look for in a country?"
Terry leaned against the window and glanced at him.
"Do you know why Giant Crocodile was able to become the head of his family?" "Terry, stop teasing him. Why would he know that?"
Patrick shook his head and laughed. He then glanced at Terry with a serious expression.
"Giant Crocodile manufactures weapons. His father died early, and he was afraid that there were few powerful people in his family. On one mission in Japan, he was surrounded by his uncle and people from 2 continents. Everyone thought that Giant Crocodile would either die or become a cripple, but unexpectedly, Lone Wolf broke through the security system of the building ahead of time. Slag Dragon also demarcated the safe zone, and Giant Crocodile easily fought a successful battle. The only mark left behind on the internet was 129. This was the first time 129 became famous internationally. Everyone wants to have 129's power, but unfortunately, no one will succeed."
Marvin wiped his face.
"Boss."
Christopher smiled and said to Marvin and Christopher seriously,
"Looking for Lone Wolf is too difficult. If they don't reply, let's make some preparations and forcefully mobilize people into the capital."
Alexander had always been fearless. He lifted his chin and said,
"I can do it."
Michael didn't reply. He was only playing with the heavy black phone in his hand. When he heard Alexander mention Lone Wolf, he only raised his eyes slightly without saying anything. The black phone suddenly lit up. Episode 535. What a coincidence. The boss is going to meet someone, too. Michael casually lowered his head and saw the notification. It was an official message from 129 that succinctly stated that Lone Wolf agreed to meet with him. It would be at a secret location, and he was to go alone. Michael was a little surprised when he saw the notification. He had been curious about Lone Wolf for a long time. At that time, he hadn't amassed enough power, but Lone Wolf, Giant Crocodile, and Slag Dragon from 129 helped him with a small situation. Those against Giant Crocodile were coincidentally Michael's enemies. It was a pity that after that time, the other party rarely appeared and irregularly accepted jobs. After that, he returned back to Chicago to recuperate. At that time, he paid 50 times the usual price for Lone Wolf to gather information about the disappearance of Harvey in Fairfield. If Lone Wolf was willing, he would definitely not be short of money. Surprisingly, it had been more than a year since Lone Wolf's disappearance. He also decided to spend money like it was nothing in hopes of contacting him. Who knew? The other party actually accepted his order. At that time, he was really interested in Lone Wolf and wanted to investigate him. After all, he might be truly alone in real life. It was just that Bessy's appearance disrupted his plan. He probably knew that she wanted to look for something in the school doctor's office. He didn't say anything and personally stayed behind, because he wanted to know which force was trying to approach him. Maybe this girl was interested in him. He simply stayed at the school doctor's office. But who knew? After staying for some more time, He became interested in her. After that, he started to lose interest in Lone Wolf. He spent more time with her instead of looking for Lone Wolf. This time, when Terry suggested contacting 129's Lone Wolf, Michael took it with a grain of salt. If Evanston really ended up in a mess, he would just take Bessy and the others back to their base camp in Japan. Unexpectedly, this Lone Wolf, who was always elusive, decided to appear. Regardless of the reason, Michael was determined to meet him. "Boss?" Christopher asked again. Seeing that Michael was silent, he couldn't help but call him again. Michael acknowledged him and came back to reality.
"I have something to do."
He threw his phone casually on the table. Seeing his expression, Christopher, Patrick, and the others stood up and looked at him seriously.
"Boss, tell us what it is." "Lone Wolf wants to meet me at 9 a.m. tomorrow for a detailed discussion."
Michael lazily put his legs together and raised his eyebrow. Christopher paused while pushing up his glasses. He raised his head and said,
"Boss, can you say that again? Michael explained that he will meet Lone Wolf tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Marvin's voice trailed off, and he slowly turned to look at Michael. Michael walked out of the study at 9 p.m. He stopped at Bessy's door with a cigarette in his hand. After he heard nothing from the room for 10 minutes, he guessed that she was asleep. He decided not to knock on her door. Just as he was about to leave, the door opened. He paused and looked inside. Bessy was wearing pajamas. Her face looked energetic and she looked like she didn't sleep as her eyes were bloodshot.
"Can't sleep?"
Michael glanced at her and asked. Bessy scratched her hair. Annoying. Michael thought that she was annoyed at the situation involving the White family and the World Poker Tour. He lowered his head and leaned over. His clear breath on her body became more obvious as he whispered in her ear,
"It's okay. I will solve it."
Bessy only felt that it was an endless loop. Unless she really disappeared, it would be difficult to solve. After hearing what he said, she suddenly calmed down and reached out to hug him. She rested her head on his shoulder and said in a muffled voice, "You said it."
"Of course."
Michael smiled and hugged her. He stared at the starlight through the window and said calmly,
"I really want to see who doesn't dare to take action."
Bessy didn't dare to respond. She feared that if she listed her enemies, Christopher and the others would collapse. She was more afraid that Michael would find out about her past. She thought about it for a while before muttering, "I will tell you something tomorrow night." Michael also wanted to ask her about her visit to the school doctor's office at the start, and didn't ask her much about it. He only smiled and said,
"Okay."
The next day, Bessy got up very early. When she woke up, Michael was already up. Not only was Michael awake, but everyone else was at the dining table. These people were either not back home, sleeping until late, or were busy, like Patrick. Everyone had a time that they usually woke up at, and the chef took notes. Today resembled a ritual as everyone got up at the same time and sat together at the dining table. Marvin picked up some bread from the kitchen expressionlessly and turned to look at the exquisite breakfast on Christopher's plate. He couldn't help but ask the chef,
"I'm only getting bread today?" "Marvin, your breakfast has been taken by Patrick."
The chef replied indifferently. What comes around, goes around. Marvin silently returned to his seat. Bessy also sat at the dining table.
"You're up so early?"
Michael handed Bessy her breakfast, surprised that she was awake so early. Bessy yawned lazily. She drank some milk before acknowledging him. "I'm going out later to meet someone."
"What a coincidence. Boss is going to meet someone later too."
Christopher smiled. Episode 536. Don't ever offend Bessy. Michael was thinking about Lone Wolf, too. He naturally didn't want to bring Bessy along. Who knew what Lone Wolf was like? He had to admit that he felt Lone Wolf could pose a threat, and he didn't want to take her along for now until he knew who he was dealing with. If he was good-looking, it would be best not to let them meet each other. He appeared serious on the outside as he said,
Right. I'll be meeting someone later, too.
Who? Bessy put her glass of milk down and asked, casually.
She isn't good-looking.
Michael wiped his hands after he was done eating. Oh. Bessy nodded and did not ask more. Patrick finished his hearty breakfast, too, and took his plate to the kitchen. When he got back, he said to Marvin,
Marvin, take Miss Miller where she needs to go later.
This was the first time they were all awake so early, but they were all interested in taking along with Michael to see who this lone wolf was. In the past, it didn't matter who drove Bessy, but now, Marvin looked up. Christopher nodded in agreement with Patrick and said,
Marvin, take good care of Miss Miller. Drive safely.
Alexander patted Marvin on the back and added,
Marvin, sorry for the trouble.
Terry didn't say anything. He simply gave Marvin a strange smile. Although Marvin was curious about Lone Wolf too, he decided this arrangement was all right. He took a bite of his bread and nodded.
Yeah, sure. What time are you leaving?
Michael ignored the 5 brothers and asked Bessy. 8:30. I have to be there at 9. Bessy hadn't planned on getting anyone to follow her, but she'd guessed that Michael wouldn't allow her to drive on her own anyway. Michael smiled. At 8:30, Marvin drove out the car that was specially meant for Bessy.
Thanks, brother.
Alexander patted Marvin on the shoulder through the open window.
I'll surely give you first-hand information.
Marvin's best response was to roll up the window. Michael stood there as he watched the car pull out of the driveway. Behind him, the other 4 brothers watched as the car left, too. Christopher smiled and said,
Miss Miller's appointment is at 9, too. That's the same as yours.
Christopher said it casually. He didn't think much about it, nor did anyone else. At this point, they were hurrying Michael to leave. Michael didn't seem as enthusiastic. Instead, he said,
What's the rush? The other party isn't going to run away.
9. Slag Dragon and Giant Crocodile were sitting in the office looking at Jared.
Boss, why did you get us here? There's something I need to let you guys know.
Jared said seriously. Jared knew that Bessy didn't want to involve him because she didn't want to drag 129 down. But was Jared such a scaredy cat? He couldn't possibly remain uninvolved. If anything went wrong, he would just leave 129 on his own accord. Although he had no idea what Bessy was involved in, he was genuinely worried for her.
Don't look so serious. My heart can't take it. Just say it.
Slag Dragon placed his hand on his chest and said a little teasingly. Jared glanced at him.
Regarding the Lone Wolf incident, she's meeting someone today.
He told them about what Bessy told him last night.
They will be meeting at the underground clubhouse today. I booked the private room beside hers so we can go over first, in case a fight really breaks out.
Jared thought about it and realized that there was nothing much he could do if they really ended up fighting.
We could at least control the situation. After all, Evanston is our territory,
he said casually. Slag Dragon's eyes lit up.
Damn! Jared, didn't I say so from the beginning? She isn't just anyone.
Jared didn't bother responding to him and turned to Giant Crocodile.
How are you handling Jonas's matters? He's taken the bait.
Giant Crocodile wasn't as optimistic as Slag Dragon.
But the situation with the people in Japan isn't so simple to handle. We'll see how it goes when we go over. We could perhaps negotiate with them again.
At 8:50, Marvin stopped the car at the clubhouse. He didn't leave Bessy alone at any point in time. He handed the car keys to the valet and left with Bessy. Bessy stood outside the clubhouse for a while. She was in a white sweatshirt today. She only ever wore a black coat under the watchful eyes of Michael, who insisted she put on something a little thicker. She pulled the hoodie down and waited at the entrance for about a minute. Then she glanced at Marvin and entered the building without shaking him off. Jared booked the 5th private room on the top level. She entered the private room at 8:55. When the attendant led them into the private room, it was still empty. Marvin couldn't help but look at her in shock. Bessy's control of her timing was always perversely accurate. She always reached on the dot. This was the first time she arrived early. Marvin wondered who exactly she was meeting. Downstairs, the 4 men followed behind Michael. Michael took off his jacket and entered the elevator before saying,
"Don't follow me up."
The 4 people, who had come along just to take a look at Lone Wolf, went quiet. Ding! The elevator doors shut. Alexander said,
"Boss didn't mention not letting us tag along, right?"
This was so frustrating. Patrick thought for a while before saying,
"We shouldn't have despised Miss Miller."
The other 3 of them were speechless. Upstairs, Michael confirmed that he had arrived in the right room. It was 8:59 a.m. He followed the attendant to the room with his hands behind his back. The attendant knocked on the door gently. Then, someone opened the door from inside. Episode 537. Nobody expected it to be her. It was Marvin who opened the door. Inside, Bessy had one hand on the table while holding a ceramic teacup in the other. She looked towards the door, a little impatiently. She was completely unprepared to see that the person standing at the door was the same person who had insisted on making her wear a jacket just half an hour ago. Several different emotions hit her. Then came silence. Michael had just finished reading the message on his cell phone. As he looked up, his expression was unreadable as usual. The girl in the room, who seemed a little unhappy, was looking at him expressionlessly. Both of them didn't make a move. It was Marvin who took a step back after just a moment of confusion. He hadn't figured it out yet.
"Michael, what are you doing here? Aren't you going to meet Lone Wolf?"
Marvin's voice broke the silence. Michael finally entered the room and looked at him gently while saying,
"Leave."
Boom. Marvin didn't ask for a reason. He simply left and closed the door behind him. Only after he left the room did Marvin understand what was going on. Michael was meeting Lone Wolf at 9 in the morning. Inside, Michael kept quiet for a while before taking another step forward tentatively.
"Are you hungry?"
Bessy wasn't responding very well to this either. Her impression of the boss in Japan was of someone cruel and violent. That image didn't fit the Michael she knew at all. What exactly was going on? Michael was the person she'd once fought with? Bessy finished the drink in one gulp. No wonder she found his movements at the Clark household familiar. She placed the teacup on the table and looked up at him. "Take a seat first. Let's talk." "Why are you looking for me?" She'd thought that the boss had found out all about her, but seeing that it was Michael, she knew that it wasn't the case.
"Collaboration."
Michael saw that she seemed calm and took the seat beside her rather than opposite her. He refilled her cup with the teapot and said,
"Bessy, please calm down first. I saw that Giant Crocodile has joined hands with the Klein family and was afraid that something would go wrong in Evanston. That's why I thought of collaborating with Lone Wolf."
Michael looked at Bessy as she picked up the teacup.
"Giant Crocodile was just offering bait."
It was known to everyone that the 5 senior members of 129 were on very good terms. Since Bessy was Lone Wolf, Giant Crocodile couldn't possibly be on Jonas's side. Bessy had so much on her mind right now that she couldn't keep up with Michael's train of thought. She casually responded, "He's not really putting out bait. He's just trying to get the entry approval from Jonas." From the moment Michael knew that Bessy was Lone Wolf, he realized that the matter in Evanston was easily solvable. A lot of questions in his mind were answered too. In Chicago, Lone Wolf, who had disappeared without a trace for a whole year, had taken up his order of all people, followed by Rosemary's incident. Lone Wolf was a tech genius, so it wasn't too much of a surprise that it turned out to be Bessy.
I'm planning to wash my hands of it once the Klein family's case is settled.
Michael looked at her tenderly and explained,
I was planning to take over the medical organization in Austria.
He explained in detail. Take over the medical organization? Bessy looked at him. With one surgery a month?
I was fighting for the position in Japan at the time and didn't have time for this. But I had to deal with the old man. I had to take up at least one surgery each month.
Even when he was recuperating in Chicago, he still stuck to it. Bessy took another sip of tea.
I figured that you were the bee who helped Giant Crocodile, but I didn't realize that you were Lone Wolf.
Michael flipped the menu casually.
You wanted to tell me about this tonight?
Not exactly. Bessy seemed a little uncertain. She looked up at Michael with some confusion. She hadn't expected herself to live past 19. Who would have known that the first time around, she somehow lived on because of Daniel? After Bertha's death, she thought that it was all over for her as well. But then, Michael appeared. Do you remember fighting with some peasants in July a few years ago? Bessy thought that she'd be bringing up this case in a life-and-death situation with the boss of Japan, or that she'd never mention it. She didn't think she'd be talking about it this casually. Michael suddenly felt a lump in his throat. His voice quivered as he said,
Back then, you...
Back then, after Daniel had told him about it, he looked all over Austria, but to no avail. Bessy folded her arms across her chest and said, How about this? You let me hit you in return. Michael had thought about it for a long time. How nice it would have been if he had met Bessy earlier, perhaps before the explosion happened, or just a year earlier. Who would have known that they'd already encountered each other back then? He felt that it was such a blessing he'd chosen to take on Harvey's case. He reached out and embraced her, then kissed her on the head lightly.
It's my fault. Hit me all you want.
At the same time, Jared called Bessy countless times, but she didn't respond. He turned to his subordinate.
Any information from the scouts?
The subordinate shook his head.
Get too close. Could something have happened?
Giant Crocodile furrowed his brows.
This won't do. I'd better go and take a look. She's too good looking for this to be safe.
Episode 538. A Big Misunderstanding. There weren't many good people on Japan's side. Giant Crocodile couldn't wait any longer. Given Bessy's character, she wouldn't have the patience to chat with them. Even 5 minutes was too much if she was talking to someone she wasn't close to. Giant Crocodile got up and opened the door. Jared was a straightforward man as well. Seeing that Giant Crocodile was getting out, he followed and made a call.
Get the guys over here.
After the call, Jared instructed,
Don't get rash. We'll see how the boss of Japan handles it first. It's best if all goes well. All right.
Giant Crocodile nodded coldly. He knew where the private room was. They were already making their way to the 5th private room while talking. They seemed rather menacing. Marvin, who was squatting outside the private room, sent a message to Patrick and the rest. He saw Jared first, who was in the lead. Marvin didn't recognize him, but he did recognize Giant Crocodile.
Mr. Giant Crocodile, you... Why didn't you follow your miss in?
Giant Crocodile knew Marvin as well and asked him about it. He was about to push open the door to the private room, but before he even made a move, the door was opened from the inside. It was Michael who opened the door, and Bessy was standing behind him. Giant Crocodile and Jared didn't manage to react in time. Boom! Boom! Footsteps stormed the hallway. Soon, they heard Alexander's anxious voice.
Boss, Lone Wolf lied to you. We saw some 129 members downstairs.
Alexander and the brothers rushed forward. They looked at Bessy and then at Giant Crocodile and Jared. Everyone went quiet. They all had only one thought in mind. Wasn't Lone Wolf here to meet the Japan's boss? Everyone was silent and in shock. Michael smiled at Giant Crocodile first and said politely,
Mr. Cree, we meet again.
Michael then turned to Jared and said,
This must be Mr. Covington, then.
Lastly, he bowed and said very courteously,
Thank you all for taking good care of her.
Slag Dragon, who had been thanked for reasons he wasn't sure of, simply said,
It's all right. It's all right.
Bessy cleared her throat. Boss Jared, let's all talk inside. Jared nodded and then made a call to inform his subordinates.
You guys don't have to come up anymore.
Giant Crocodile always had a serious look on his face, no matter how messy he felt on the inside. Meanwhile, Slag Dragon kept quiet and just followed them inside. The few bosses entered the private room. Only Alexander, Patrick, and the brothers were left outside.
Christopher, what did I just see?
Alexander asked expressionlessly. Christopher didn't say anything. He simply turned to Marvin silently. Marvin had long figured out what was going on. He got up from his squatting position and looked at them.
It's exactly what you're seeing.
Inside, Slag Dragon was confused.
No, wait, sir. What's going on?
Besides Slag Dragon, even Jared was a little out of sorts. He downed a cup of tea to calm himself. Then he turned to look at Bessy as calmly as possible.
In that case, I won't have to get involved in the matters in Evanston. Has the White family settled the things for tomorrow yet?
Bessy nodded.
That's good then.
Jared had no idea what else he could say. He asked Michael,
Michael, the conflict between you and Giant Crocodile. It's all a misunderstanding.
Michael raised a cup to Giant Crocodile. Giant Crocodile took a sip of his tea with a blank expression. They talked about the following day's matters and then left as soon as they figured out that Michael and Bessy would still have matters to discuss. In the car, Jared smiled easily in the back seat.
After tomorrow, Evanston will be all right again.
How could it not? 129's son-in-law was the boss in Japan. With Bessy around, even the boss of Japan would have to be polite to him. Jared raised his chin. The next day, in the evening, the White family set off together. Michael stood at the villa with a stern look on his face.
Bring the men along first, but don't reveal your positions. If you encounter Giant Crocodile's men, don't take action without thinking.
Terry already knew that Giant Crocodile was a friend, not a foe. Upon hearing that, they responded,
Yes.
He left immediately.
Brother, both of you.
Rosemary had been busy with the Clark family matters, but she knew what was going on in Evanston. Seeing Michael's attitude now, she furrowed her brows and asked,
I feel like there must be a trick somewhere. Perhaps the White family have something in store for us.
Rosemary, don't worry. Bessy comforted her. She and Michael didn't stay long. They went off to meet the White family soon after. Kenneth looked at Michael and greeted him, then kept quiet. Michael had lost his position as the crown prince of the Clark family. Few people still addressed him with the respect that they once did. Upon hearing Kenneth's voice, Michael raised a brow at him, but didn't speak. This was the first huge transaction between the White family and Austria. There couldn't be any mistakes at all. Otherwise, the White family might end up in ruins like the Miller family. That said, the Miller family was starting to find their way now. The White family members were all serious and excited about this now. Only Kenneth's uncle was looking at Bessy coldly. Episode 539. Johann. North of the city, the White family set off in 2 cargo planes. Kenneth checked the goods to ensure that nothing was left out before walking towards Bessy and Michael.
We'll take off at 9 sharp.
They'd be in Austria at night, which would be more convenient for movement. Bessy didn't say much. She coughed a little and then said, "Get ready." Michael turned to her when he heard her cough. She looked at him and shook her head to tell him she was fine. The few people in charge of the White family were discussing something with the pilots. At 8:30, Norman walked towards Bessy and Kenneth.
Mr. White, Miss Miller, Mr. Clark, we can board now. Let's go.
Kenneth let Bessy and Michael lead the way. Bam! Just as he said that, a few huge lights in the airport were turned on. The whole airport was lit.
It isn't so simple to leave like that.
A few black cars stopped in the distance as an old voice rang out. 2 people alighted from the black car in the lead. The man who spoke smiled at Kenneth and Bessy. It was Frank. Beside him was none other than Jonas.
What are you doing here?
Norman's expression changed. This was the White family's confidential information. Besides the few of them, the rest of the White family didn't even know about this operation. How did the World Poker Tour and Jonas find out that they were going to send the goods out that day? They were full of questions when Jonas turned towards Michael tenderly.
Michael, my son, what do you have to say now?
Michael held Bessy's hand.
Nothing.
Upon hearing what Jonas said, the White family members turned and glared at Bessy and Michael in disbelief.
You both. We should have listened to Mr. White's brother. Impossible. Miss Miller isn't such a person.
Norman shook his head. Frank couldn't be bothered by the White family's confusion. He spoke as calmly as usual.
Bring Bessy back and check the goods thoroughly.
Under the bright lights, his smile seemed especially cold.
Mr. Schuler.
Jonas faced Frank as he said,
We had a deal. The goods are mine. They're meant for the next generation of the top 4 households. As long as you find me what I want, the rest is up to you.
Frank wasn't too bothered. Both of them decided on the White family's predicament. Speak up. He looked at Frank in shock.
Back in Austria, you said that you'd just take Bessy and ensure that the White family would be in good hands.
Frank smiled at him.
Isn't it good that I'm ensuring your next generation will survive?
Kenneth's uncle heaved. The rest of the White family just got what was going on. They turned towards Mr. White's brother.
Uncle!
Kenneth grabbed his uncle's collar. His uncle could barely react.
Kenneth,
Frank didn't care that the White family was in a mess right now and calmly instructed his subordinates.
Get moving. Bessy, leave.
Kenneth shoved his uncle aside and then stood before her. He looked at Frank and said,
You just want the White family. It has nothing to do with her. Let her go.
Norman seemed distressed too.
Michael, take Miss Miller with you. Miss Miller can fight well. You'll be all right.
No need. Bessy squeezed Michael's hand and took 2 steps forward. She then looked at Frank seriously. Do you think you can capture me?
You mean the underground champion?
Frank looked at Bessy with feigned surprise.
What a pity. You probably don't know yet that your body is now affected by the hybrid virus Kenneth's uncle planted in you. You won't be able to fight today.
Kenneth and Norman went pale. Kenneth staggered backwards and then looked at his uncle, who was still on the ground.
Uncle, you... Kenneth, what was I to do? You guys told me that my brother died because of her, and then everyone in the White family only listened to her. For all we know, the White family might just take her last name someday, and the Institute would have to be renamed too. Humans are all selfish. I was just putting the White family's interest first.
Kenneth's uncle exclaimed while avoiding eye contact with Bessy.
Yes, the entire White family is heeding her.
Kenneth's eyes went red as he shut them for a moment.
But after Grandpa passed on, she was also the only one taking care of the White family, busying herself for us, fighting for the Institute. Was the prophet in Austria fake? Were the reports from the Research Institute fake? She's a master in the IT field. She could have just done her research in the Miller family. Tell me, why did she choose to lead the remaining few senior members of the Research Institute and work with them day and night? Did she deserve such doubting from you? Huh?
Michael was standing to the side. His fists were clenched tightly as he eyed Frank and his uncle coldly. He licked his lips and said seriously,
"Very well. There's no other choice."
Frank smiled at Bessy and Michael before setting his gaze on Bessy eventually. He sighed.
My goddaughter, I'd really underestimated your abilities back then. I never expected you to be able to wreak havoc in the World Poker Tour, even after you left. It seems like I've got to be harsher on you.
On that note, he shook his head and kept smiling.
You probably don't know that the World Poker Tour's backing is none other than Austria's underground alliance.
Frank smiled proudly. The moment he said that, a whooshing sound could be heard above their heads. A helicopter was suspended in mid-air as a few figures grabbing onto sturdy ropes hopped off the helicopter in a swift motion. The 4 figures landed on one knee and called out zealously,
"Subordinate, greet Johann."
Episode 540. Another Inmate. Besides Michael, everyone was stunned.
What are Elias's men doing here?
Frank was especially flustered. He scanned his surroundings, but didn't see Johann around.
Johann is here too?
Frank was rather confused. Besides carrying out tasks, Johann was never involved in the other miscellaneous stuff. Now that his 4 allied men had all appeared, Frank couldn't help but wonder what was being plotted. In any case, nobody was going to ruin his plans today. Whatever Frank said was actually quite foreign to most of the White family. The existence of the Underground Alliance in Austria wasn't widely known. The rest of the people present exchanged glances. At this point, half of them walked over. Only Kenneth's uncle, who was still on the ground, looked up in horror.
It's them! It's them! The force that's as powerful as the Moss family. They're on equal standing with the senior members of the Moss family. They were the ones who gave me the information about Miss Miller back in Austria.
If it wasn't for that, Kenneth's uncle wouldn't have hurried back to Austria so soon. They all knew what the Underground Alliance was, but it was a different thing to find out that they were on equal standing with the Moss family. The Moss family was such a powerful group in Austria that they managed to back the World Poker Tour in its rapid development over just a few years. Kenneth and his uncle initially thought that the White family could get help from this certain power. They didn't expect that the power they were facing would be as strong as the Moss family. They could destroy the White family any time. The White family didn't feel blessed anymore. Kenneth looked cold as usual. He turned to Bessy and smiled sadly.
You shouldn't have gotten involved, Mr. Clark,
Norman said as his mind cleared up. He seemed to have come to a tough decision as he said between clenched teeth,
Please, take Miss Miller and Kenneth with you. I'll deal with the Schuler family.
As he was speaking, Bessy walked through the crowd expressionlessly. She didn't respond to Norman.
Miss Miller, no!
Norman hurriedly stopped her. He had always known that Bessy was a strong-headed girl who could fight, but whatever Kenneth's uncle had just said scared Norman. Bessy's body wasn't in a good state right now.
Miss Miller!
Bessy stopped in her tracks and calmly said to him, Norman, get them to prepare themselves. We'll set off right now. Norman was shocked.
But, Miss Miller,
Before he was done talking, Bessy stood in place before the 4 men. She turned towards the other men in black around and asked, Those are your men? Elias, the one kneeling in front of the other 3 men, raised his arm.
Responding to Johann, those are our men. Good.
Bessy had her hands over her chest. She calmly said, Clear the tracks in Austria and take a team with you.
Yes.
Elias responded. The place went quiet for a while before Bessy turned towards Frank, who no longer looked smug. Apologies, grandfather. I happen to have the Underground Alliance as my backing too. The 2 factions faced each other in the huge airport space. When Bessy said that, even Jonas's expression changed. His mind buzzed. He'd always thought of Bessy as someone like Claudius. Smart, but not smart enough. He felt that she and Claudius would always be under someone else's control and were never going to be on the same level as him and Frank. Whether it was IT or nuclear engineering, Jonas treated her niche areas with disdain. But now, Bessy was actually part of the Underground Alliance. Jonas looked at Bessy with mixed expressions. As crafty as he was, he never saw this coming. In that case, Jonas was now unsure when it came to facing Giant Crocodile. He plotted against Frank and then contacted the 129, all in a bid to gain control over the top 4 households in Evanston. He wanted the whole of Evanston to be his territory. He also wanted Michael to marry Sherry because he felt that she was good enough. But now, nothing was going according to his plan. He never expected Bessy to have such strong backing. Had he known, he wouldn't have stopped Michael from being with her. Michael, who had remained silent this whole time, now walked towards Bessy. He grabbed her right hand and took her pulse.
How could I have handed you to the White family and Eric?
Michael recalled the viruses that existed where Daniel was and couldn't help but feel distressed.
Bessy, let's go back. We'll look for Daniel right away.
Jonas was getting flustered now that things were no longer in his control.
Michael, you!
Michael snapped at him and took a deep breath to calm himself. He tapped the mic on his earbuds and instructed coldly.
Place this area on lockdown. Kenneth's uncle will stay. As for the rest, settle every single one of them as needed.
Frank finally snapped out of his daze.
I admit that I underestimated you, but my son is on the way. Alejandro of the Underground Alliance, right?
Giant Crocodile and Terry appeared from behind. Terry went over and shook Michael's hand.
His men have been stopped at the borders. As for the 27 Underground Alliance men whom you left in the suburbs, we have already contacted Harvey to send them to an international maximum security prison.